Good evening, everyone. My name is Fred. I'm indeed from Paris, so excuse my French. I'm the co-founder of Alpic, and today I'd like to share with you a few tips on running and improving the efficiency of your MCP server in production. Okay, here we go. Just like when you're developing web application or mobile application or REST API, you're relying on specific measure like the user experience or the developer experience to improve on the service you provide. With a new persona coming into the space, basically AI agent consuming your product and services through MCP, you need to make sure that their agentic experience is at the maximum level possible. In order to do so, it's very important to use a key metric to measure the agentic experience quality. And what we'll use here is the task completion rate, meaning at what point an AI agent is able to complete a task using your MCP server. Task completion rate relying to the agentic experience is very hard to measure in production because as a developer of MCP server, you only have a picture of a part of the conversation between a user and an AI agent. In order to measure the agentic experience, you need to rely on proxy metrics rather than the task completion rate itself. There are 4 of them that we can use, 2 which can be measured in CI/CD during the software development lifecycle, which is basically the tool accuracy and the parameter accuracy, meaning at what level an AI agent is capable of selecting the correct tools that you provide and invoke it with the correct parameter. And 2 proxy metrics that we can measure in production, which is basically the cost. How many tokens are your server returning and consuming precious context window space on the LLM, and the quantity, the latency of interaction between an AI agent and your MCP server. The more accuracy you have with your MCP server, the better it is. Task completion rate will increase. The less token you return during your server, the better it is because you consume less window space. And the less quantity of interaction you have between the AI agents and your MCP server, the better it is because you have less chance to diverge from the optimistic scenario you envisioned. There are 3 locations as an MCP server developer that you can act on to improve those various proxy metrics. During tool list, when you expose the quantity of interaction that an AI agent can have with your server. During tool use, when you respond with a payload to express the result of an operation. And during the send of notifications to an AI agent saying that the list of tools has changed. Let's take a look at the first one. Here is a benchmark I ran to showcase the decrease of tool use accuracy as the quantity of tool available for an LLM increase. And you can see that the accuracy decrease logarithmically as the quantity of tool increase. This is probably why you have tools like Cursor saying you cannot have more than 40 tools at some point connected to your LLM, because above this threshold, the tool that is being used by the LLM has more chances to be the wrong one than the correct one. However, this pattern has gained a lot of popularity as people have developed MCP servers that are one-on-one wrapper on their existing API endpoints, which usually are far more than a few. You even have companies like Postman here that distributed generator using public open API specs to generate API servers, to generate MCP server. Another thing that we can measure when we expose tool is the impact of the quantity of tools that are being present in an MCP server. The more parameter you have, it also decreases the chances of actually using the correct parameter and using the correct tool, but only linearly. Another good example of using a lot of parameter and relying more on polymorphism than using a lot of tools is a layer tool pattern that our friends of Goose have first broadcast, which basically use only 3 tools to describe the whole API that you can do on your MCP server. Listing the services, listing the tools for specific services, and calling a tool. When you develop an MCP server, you have to strike a balance between polymorphism and single responsibility with a one-on-one wrapper. Of course, the correct pattern lies in between, and what you need to think when developing MCP server is think in terms of workflow. basically encapsulating multiple API calls that reflects a user story, a user workflow, into a single MCP tool. Let's take a look at tool use. When responding to a tool use, your MCP server can straight away respond with a full payload of your API, like this example here from Stripe API. But you can see there is a lot of redundancy and empty property that does not bring context, additional context, and that should be removed before being returned to the MCP to decrease the quantity of window being used. You can also use errors as not dead ends, meaning you can give additional context to an LLM when responding with an error to help him self-recover and try to accomplish the initial task without relying on user interaction. Finally, tool notification. My advice here is not to use them. A lot of models out there build cache on top of tools, for example, used as a cache key. So if you change the list of tools, you will basically invalidate cache. So prefer always less tools with more parameter rather than more tools with less parameter. Try to encapsulate tools as agent stories. Strip useless attributes from your response and return meaningful error message to allow self-recovery, and do not broadcast tool change. In order to do all of that, my team and I have come up with Alpic, which is basically an all-in-one MCP hosting platform that we just launched this week. So I'm very happy to show you a little bit more during a small demo. When you're on Alpic, the entry point is basically giving you tools to deploy as fast as possible and as easily as possible an MCP server. So you can basically connect your GitHub account, and from that, search for the repo you want to deploy. I have one just here. In order to have an MCP server that you can then call from any AI agent out there. You can configure environment variable or build settings if you want to change from the defaults that we have, but we try to abstract that away from you as much as possible. Just give us your repo, and we'll make sure we can deploy it as fast as possible. When deploying, you have, of course, a list of all the deployments that are ongoing, logs of your server. You have multiple environments if you want to have a production environment and other branches tracking other environments. And you have analytics. And let me show you another server with a lot of usage. I was sharing with you during the few tips that I share with you to improve the efficiency of your server, to try to reduce the quantity of interaction and decrease the quantity of tokens used in the context window. The analytics modules that we've developed allows you to measure in production the quantity, for example, of token. So if I scroll down a little bit, those are actual production number of MCP servers that we are running. Here you can see the evolution day by day of the quantity of token returned by a specific tool broadcasted by the server. And you can see that on September 4th, we released in production a new version that consequently increased the quantity of token returned by the tool, which led to another release the day after to reduce back this quantity of token output. This kind of analytics gives you the tool to make sure that your server in production is as efficient as possible. Just like I shared before, there are metrics that you can measure in production and some that you need to measure during CI/CD before going to production. We've also came out with an open source tool called MCP eval that you can use to run a test on your MCP server with an AI agent to check if the correct tool is called with the correct parameter depending on the situation you're facing, allowing you to measure the accuracy of your tools in your MCP server. Running back quickly to my slides. If you want to build an MCP server, feel free to scan this code. We'll allow you to use the platform. You can come to me after if you have any question. Happy to tell you more about Alpic. Thank you for your time.